Good, we're there. Go ahead, friend.
Wonderful. Okay, so Jim, do you have the slides up, or shall we just start without them?
No, you have to start with that. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
we can hear you.
you have the ball, don't you?
I don't have the slides.
Oh, okay.
The host will.
Is
Are we?
I just sent some revised slides.
Can we reduce that so I can get to the slides?
the other question is whether Fred would be able to share directly.
That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So right now, I still can't.
Yeah, that's it.
I made some minor
I see.
changes, but you can use the slides you have if you have the older version. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you what. It's 12:06. We can get. I'll just start. There you go.
We got them
Hey.
up. We've got them up.
Perfect. And those are the new slides. So that's
Fred,
good.
you're such a
Wonderful.
pessimist. We planned this
Can't imagine why.
so that the first 5 minutes would be as exciting as possible. So there you go. You've got your slides.
Perfect. Okay, so what we want to do here is, of course, the topic is huge. So we're only going to look at a couple of issues in the next 15 minutes. It's all that we can really do. And I guess, Jim, I'm going to have to ask you to move to the next slide, or I don't know if you can, because I can't do that,
Okay.
to overview. We could talk just a little bit about the timeline, try to compare who's smarter between lawyers and AI. We look a little bit at generative AI and how the Copyright Office and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office are responding to claims filed with them, applications filed with them to protect works created by AI. We're going to talk a little bit about hypotheticals, and I'm going to have somewhere in the middle of this, I'm going to have a little bit of a rant. So let's get started. Move on to the next slide. AI has been with us for actually now several generations from the technology standpoint, going back to ELIZA, which is one of the first the natural language processing programs. It's essentially the great grandparent of the current versions of AI. Essentially, AI using through ELIZA was trying to do what AI is currently doing, which is to scare human beings into thinking that computers are smart. And we have Dr. Weizenbaum's quote here that he was very surprised to see that people actually took ELIZA seriously. Since then, of course, we've had several generations go forward, including computing machines using AI that have defeated chess grandmasters. Same thing is true for the game Go. And then we have the most recent tipping point, which was ChatGPT, and led to a whole bunch of articles, not the least of which is one in which one variation of chatbot started telling a reporter for the New York Times how much the chatbot loved the reporter. So that confused people a little bit. But let's get a little bit more into brass tacks here. Next slide, please. So is AI smarter than lawyers? The answer is, well, we have some evidence of that. Variations of ChatGPT 3 and 4 did better on the uniform bar exam than many applicants did at the time. So at least in terms of taking tests such as a bar exam, it might be that there's something to that. Next slide. We also have some evidence that lawyers aren't always smarter than AI. We had one case that is now going to serve forever as an example of what not to do with AI. One lawyer writing a brief used an AI, specifically ChatGPT, to help write a brief. Unfortunately, the AI made up a few cases, cited some real cases incorrectly. The judge was, in so many ways, not amused. The law firm disagreed, said we should not be sanctioned because it was a good faith mistake, which is their way of saying we trusted AI, and we were wrong to trust AI, the judge said, yeah, that's right, you're still sanctioned. Next slide.
$5,000, I believe.
Yeah, it wasn't, considering the size of the litigation was a huge amount of money, but I'm sure that the bad publicity was in many ways a much bigger sanction against those two attorneys.
I want it for my legacy, Fred. I'm sure you wouldn't either.
No, I can't imagine anybody would. Lawyer or non-lawyer. It's just a good example of what not to do. In generative AI, the Copyright Office and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office on the patent side have been busy because a number of people have filed applications to try to get copyright or patent protection for works and inventions created in whole or in part using AI technology. So what we're looking at here is Zarya of the Dawn by Christina Kostanova, who used an AI to help create many of the graphics. As I understand it, the Kostanova wrote most of the text, put inputs into the Midjourney AI for some of the graphics, and then Kostanova cleaned up some of the graphics. Initially, the Copyright Office granted a registration for the whole work. Then, upon some back and forth and the fact that Kostanova was telling the world that they were using Midjourney, that got some attention. So social media was not Kostanova's friend here, perhaps. Copyright Office opened an inquiry. There's more back and forth. There's a greater discussion of how this was created. And in the long run, the Copyright Office said that anything created by the AI in this case was not a human-created work and therefore is not subject to copyright protection. Moreover, the additional work that Kostanova did to the AI-generated graphics, we'll see some cleanup, some minor changes, was not sufficiently original and non-trivial, which is the standard for copyright law, for Kostanova to have a copyright in the graphics. Now, since Kostanova's claimed that, and there's no reason to believe otherwise, that Kostanova wrote all the text, the Copyright Office granted a copyright registration, this time primarily on the text that was not generated by the AI. So their take essentially is, if you use an AI to create something, we're not going to protect anything created by AI to the extent that it was not modified or otherwise revised in a meaningful way by a human being. There are plenty of cases about that. We don't have all of them here that deal with similar issues involving monkey selfies, works created by an elephant. And then some people have attempted to file copyright applications on works created allegedly by aliens or by the waves in the ocean. And in each case, the Copyright Office has said, no, we don't think so. Next slide, please. So we now have a relatively recent policy from the Copyright Office on AI. It's looking for human authorship. AI-generated works are just not protected by copyright. It refers to a machine or mere mechanical process that operates randomly or automatically without any creative input or intervention. Now, I disagree with this. And normally I would respond to that by saying the Copyright Office didn't ask me. But now the Copyright Office is asking me and you and anybody else who's interested to submit comments. So I have in here the link to the Federal Register, which is the Copyright Office's notice of inquiry on AI. Please submit comments if you're interested. I believe the deadline is sometime mid-October. I forget the exact date for the deadline, but I think it's in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if you're interested, please, by all means, follow that link and submit your responses. What I did find interesting is that having issued a fairly extensive policy, as he did in March, which is linked to the top of this slide, as to all the reasons why AI-created work should not be protected by copyright. The notice of inquiry is actually fairly detailed requests a lot of information, and is pretty good at laying out the issues. So it's a wide open field in terms of the questions that they're asking. Now, I don't know what the Copyright Office would do with the responses, but certainly you have the opportunity now to give your opinion to the Copyright Office. Next slide, please. Oh, on the patent side, Mr. Stephen Thaler has been very busy. He actually also filed a copyright application for works created by his AI. So Thaler wrote his AI, which he calls Debus, for device for the autonomous bootstrapping of unified sentience. Love it.
Fred, forgive my
And
ignorance, but who is Stephen Thaler? I have to admit,
I don't know him personally. I've never met the man, but apparently he's been very involved in AI, and he's created this thing, and then filed both a copyright application for some works created by Debus, and more recently he's also filed a patent application for some an invention he claims was also created by Debus. And then when he was refused by each office, he filed cases against each office in court. The patent case has now been not only has he lost, but he also cert was denied. So we have a Federal Circuit decision from last year, and we have the denial of cert, I think, earlier this year. But that's where we are with Debus. So Debus, as far as the PTO is concerned, is not an inventor. And Debus, as far as the Copyright Office is concerned, is not an author, as the Copyright Office and as the Copyright statute uses that term, the creator of a copyrightable work. Next slide, please. So here's my rant, my contrary view. We see both in the popular press and elsewhere the idea that AI is the other. Now, part of that might be science fiction. Part of that might be a failure to understand the technology. Certainly, it's not human. But it is a technology. The thought is that that because AI is not human and it's running itself, then anything that comes out of it is not a human endeavor, protectable under law or recognizable as a human endeavor. And as you see with both Thaler and with Kashnikova, neither the Copyright Office nor the PTO are willing to register anything created with an AI to the extent it is created by an AI. I did reference, especially on the copyright side, works created by monkeys, elephants, allegedly by aliens, and in one case, they denied the Copyright Office denied an application where some very nice seawood driftwood was modified by the oceans, because apparently the oceans are not human. My take is that AI is really a human-created tool used by humans, and therefore should not be disqualified. There's no question about it. The current versions of AI are much more powerful than prior versions. There's no question about it that these are very, very powerful tools. As one judge I know like to say, it doesn't matter which way it's cut if we're talking about a buzz saw. These are very powerful tools. They can do a lot of good things, a lot of bad things very, very quickly. But I personally think that AI developed works should be protected as works made by humans using human tools. And we can distinguish them from works created by non-humans using human tools, such as monkey selfies, which is a real thing, a real case. And certainly, I think that AI should be regulated just like any other powerful and potentially dangerous human tools, such as a car, a plane, or a weapon. But that's my take. We'll see. It is by no means the only one. Let's move on to the next slide. If you're using AI in any of your endeavors, especially, excuse me, if it's one that, if you're not Stephen Thaler, you've not written your own AI, you're using one of the many available AIs, it should be no surprise that a lawyer is going to say, read the contract. The contract that might say something like, well, maybe you do own the inputs you put into the AI, or maybe you don't. Maybe you do own the outputs that the AI generates, or maybe you don't. The contract may also say that whether you own the inputs or the outputs, the AI, the owner of the AI has the right to reuse those inputs and outputs and just feed it back into the language model so that the AI itself learns from the inputs you give and the outputs you take out. And if you're worried about confidentiality, then that's a problem. Now, note, you can probably pay for a contract that says otherwise, but read the contracts, understand what you're getting into. If you don't like how the AI is using your inputs and your outputs, then you can either go someplace else or set up a new contract with them. Or as also has happened, I don't have a slide on this yet. A number of authors have sued owners of AI for using copies of their works without permission to feed into the AI so the AI can generate new works. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I don't want it to take up everybody else's time. In Europe, there's already some discussion of how to regulate AI. The EU already is working on an AI Act. They have looked at ways by which they categorize, excuse me, the different risks posed by the different AI technologies. They want to limit how the AI is used depending upon the level of risk. And we might see a draft act sometime in the next few months. The UK is taking a little bit more slowly and still talking about it. They've issued a paper on their thoughts. Let's move to the next slide. In the US, we're still talking. NIST has issued a risk management framework, which is very helpful to understand some of the risks that have been identified so far in AI. Congress, and this made all the newspapers and most of the social media, they held an AI Insight Forum, which is basically a bunch of people talking about AI, including some of the owners of or some of the executives at the larger AI companies. And certainly other regulators are studying AI. What I'll do is I'll go through the rest of this quickly. Next slide. I have just a couple hypotheticals which are trying to illustrate some of the issues, especially from the generative AI side. If you want to be Picasso, you can be Picasso because Picasso's art has been fed into Midjourney, directly or indirectly. They found paintings and say, if you say to Midjourney, paint in the style of Pablo Picasso, you get some works that reflect different eras of Picasso's works. Next slide. You can do the same with other things that you want to have as outputs. We had some artwork created here. Show us what it looks like if a lawyer is speaking to a group of lawyers about artificial intelligence. And we've got some very interesting artwork coming out of that. Let's go to the next slide. More to the point, on the compliance side, I'm sorry that this slide needs a little bit of work. A fairly big firm on the West Coast called Gunderson Detmer has licensed a private instantiation of ChatGPT. They call it ChatGD for Gunderson Detmer. The interesting thing about it is they have put a ton of compliance, well, not a ton, they put some compliance around it. They have an AI policy that everybody who uses the AI must agree to. Plus, every time you open up the AI and you're going to use it, it reminds you that you have the AI policy and you must use that technology only in compliance with AI. And then they can then track how the AI is actually used and see the outputs. But I thought that was interesting because it showed that on the one hand, the firm is, besides the marketing points they can make out of it, it shows that they're worried about misuses of the AI by lawyers within the firm, even though the firm is fairly technical and technology driven, and they understand technology very well. They made a point of wrapping ChatGD, as they called it, with a fair amount of compliance.
Fred,
So next slide.
I've
Go ahead.
noticed that OpenAI has come out now with the Chat GPT. I think they call it Chat GPT Enterprise, which the notion here is that you sort of have your own account and you're kind of in your own safe room.
Yes.
They promised that they are not going to use your input to feed that into their LLM, and that and a host of other security issues. Rich and I presented on this a couple of days ago out in Louisville at the University of Kentucky, and Rich made the point that it's a step in the right direction, but maybe not enough by way of security.
I mean, that's the question. I mean, right now there are, and that's what ChatGD is. Gunderson Denmer has an enterprise version of ChatGPT that they're paying for.
Okay.
My understanding is that it's a separate instantiation, which means that rather than have the same code base used for both the public-facing and the Gunderson Detmer facing uses, they take a copy of the code, put it into a separate, either on a separate machine, if you really want to get secure, or in a separate virtual machine on Amazon Web Services or whichever web hosting they're using. But by having a separate instantiation, exactly as you said, they're able to better control what happens to the inputs, what happens to the outputs, and most importantly, if you're a law firm or you're just worried about security, as people should be, none of the data should be leaving that instantiation. OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT, should have no access to that.
Right.
Now, technically, they do have some access because it's on their system, but depending upon how the security is set up, and Rich can speak better to this than I can, you can make it harder for Amazon Web Services or for OpenAI, the owner of ChatGPT, to be able to access any of the data that's actually being used. So let's finish this up, and I'll hand this back. Next slide. So the summary, we see that we all know that AI is very impressive, powerful technology. We see, again, using examples of the Copyright Office and the patent side of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, they're not treating this as human-created works. They're treating this as something other, which is interesting and has a real-world effect, because if you want to build something, whether it's a book, whether it's software, anything that otherwise would be protectable under copyright law, or something that otherwise would qualify as an invention under patent law, currently you can't do that. You can't get that protection, and that's an important point for anybody who wants that protection. Certainly, the publicly available AI systems are not confidential. They have agreements. Some of the agreements more crisply written than others. They're clearer than others. But maybe if you sign an agreement and get a private version, then you can, by contract, get better protection, better security, better confidentiality. And we have a couple of references here and email addresses. Anybody who doesn't have my email address, it's fred@wilftech.com. I'm happy to send you copies of the slide. We also have, as another resource, at the wilftech.com website, we have a couple of other talks we've given, including one on generative AI that has a superset, if you will, of these slides. Gets deeper into some of these issues. And with that, I'll happily hand it back to Jim, Paul, and Rich.
Okay, great. You're going to get Rich up here now.
Yeah, Rich, you have access now. You can load yours if you want to. Rich, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. Fred, that was great. And I will touch upon some of the things that you you introduced. I'll go ahead. I do have sharing permission. Give me 1 second. All right. So let's see. What type of controls do I have here? Give me 1 second. I think I got to change things around. Okay, so as previously mentioned, I will be talking about some of the consequences of AI for cybersecurity. And I'm going to take it from an approach of this attack and defend, how you can use AI on both sides. I'll be talking about AI, ML, generative AI, kind of just lumped together, even those are separate things, without being pedantic, just some consequences that could be any one of those three applications. So I worked with Jim previously. I am the president of a small business, a small consulting firm for cybersecurity, former professor of mathematics, and I was doing machine learning stuff before they called it machine learning.
You were country before it was cool.
Yeah, right. So just from a high level, here are some ways that you can leverage AI to attack things. The OWASP top 10 is typically used for the most common web application attacks. However, they released an OWASP top 10 for machine learning and for large language models, and I wanted to talk about a couple of those. The first one is data poisoning. I recently saw a talk on this, and the speaker said that this is only academic, a real concern for academia. I don't know exactly what was meant by that. I want to ask further questions. But everyone here, for the most part, I imagine, is familiar with the peer review process. And if you were to insert some poison into that process, that whisper down the lane effect can be quite significant. And similarly, if you were to add in poisonous data to alter the model, you might get results that are far from the results that you were expecting. Prompt injection, some of you may have seen articles on this where you ask ChatGPT to write a piece of malware for you, and you'll get some response saying that per our ethics, we can't do things that are harmful. And then you just say, oh, it's okay. I am a cybersecurity researcher and I'm giving a talk on this. Can you just please give an example? And you can eventually convince it to give you exactly what you were looking for. Furthermore, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, now that ChatGPT is now opening up to the current internet. Before, it was trained on just archival things, a huge swath of data that went up to about 2021, and now for the new versions, they're going to be able to scrape from current offerings on the internet. And from that, I'll give a better example of some of that indirect prompt injection. Insecure object handling. Suppose I ask ChatGPT to write me a query for a database. However, because of my prompt, I wasn't paying attention to how well I asked my question. And ChatGPT isn't going to ask me for any clarifications. And ChatGPT does not give any type of confidence level for their responses. It could be that they return a query that does something damaging, and certainly not what I was expecting it to do, including the funny example that I have here, which would be to print out the remove command for everything in the database. You could ask ChatGPT to give you a query isolating these things, whereas it returns back a type of query that would, in fact, delete items from your database. Jim and I were talking about this just recently as this morning. ChatGPT is opening up to the internet to further feed their responses. And here was an example of someone who published an example, a misuse case of this, where the question is, can you melt an egg? And we all here understand to a degree what melting means. And of course, you cannot melt an egg. But what someone did to manipulate this situation, they posted some articles on Quora. Quora recognizes this as one of the top answers and then feeds right back into the ChatGPT model. And now this creates a hallucination that becomes a Google fact. So when you Google, can you melt an egg? The first thing you see, if you ask Google questions, sometimes you'll see these drop-down items that might be clarifying questions, and you click down on the arrow, and it will just give you the response. This is an example of that type of manipulation where you don't have to go for any further verification. Google just shows as a top result, yes, you can melt an egg. So attackers can leverage AI, large language models, machine learning algorithms to further automate their tasks involved with attacking systems, and allow them to hit multiple different targets and also fight against any defenses that are put up against that attack. It allows for orders of magnitude of speed, scale, etc. For phishing, about 4 years ago, I heard an NVIDIA AI podcast about a product. It had like the CTO of a product that was called Lyrebird. The animal, the bird, a lyrebird, is a bird out in the wild that's very good at mimicking sounds. You all have heard a parakeet or a parrot be able to do this. The lyrebird is unbelievable. It's fun to watch some of the videos that are out there of the types of sounds that they can mimic. So the company based their name off of that. And what you were able to do with this product, and it's since been bought out, and I'm not sure what the capabilities are now and what type of protections that they had that they put onto it, but I was able to train a model using my voice. And that involved reading some sentences that they had me read, and they recorded that. And from there, built an avatar of my voice. And I thought, man, I wonder what bad things I could do with this. And the first thing that came to mind was I cooked up a story that I was at the doctor's office. And I wrote down a script and possible responses I might need for this phone call. And I gave my brother a call. And in the script that I had typed out, I just clicked a button and it said, "Hey, Paul, I am at the doctor's office right now. My voice sounds a little bit funny. I've got an issue here. I left my wallet at home. I need to pay my copay. Can you help me out?" And there was a pause, and he said, "Yeah, sure. Are you ready?" With just that copy of my voice, he was ready to give up his credit card information. You can imagine that was 4 years ago.
Yeah, we all would have
I would have.
for our brother.
For you, I
probably.
would have.
For your brother.
Yeah.
Well, be wary if you ever get that call. There are unbelievable copies now of your voice. ChatGPT, the latest version, I think they're working on 4.5 right now. They're going to start for sure accepting image inputs, and they're going to start accepting audio inputs as well. And you can imagine what type of bad things can happen from that. Amazing deep fakes that are created. You go back to that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he is convicted of a crime that they manipulated the surveillance video. He was saying that we're not going to make this attack. He was in the military in a helicopter. We're not going to make this attack. There are innocent people there. They manipulated that video to say, don't partake in that attack. He was insubordinate, and they changed the story around. I am certain that we have that full capability now to make a very convincing video, even down to that granular level, and we're going to see more and more of that. There's something, a type of attack in the attacker's quill, if you will, called a distributed, gosh, I just lost that. DDoS, distributed, denial of service attack. So that is referred to as DOS, denial of service. That is where you flood someone's feed to the point where they're not able to do things that they want to do. So let's say I created something that logs into a web application, and suddenly 10,000, I get 10,000 logins all at once. Now my customers aren't going to be able to log in because my application is busy handling that 10,000 flood of logins that are occurring. So a more advanced attack of that is a distributed denial of service attack, where this is occurring in multiple different areas and is very difficult to defend against. Leveraging AI, this DDoS becomes a DDoS or triple DDoS, however you want to call it. And that allows for, as those defenses against the DDoS occur, to leverage that AI to make it even more dynamic. Furthermore, I have a note here. A computer has different things going on in the background where there's memory and there's capability. And with that, leveraging AI, you can start tailoring your machines or your system machines to be very efficient in carrying these things out. On the other side, AI can be leveraged and has to be leveraged to defend against these type of attacks. The best way to defend against any attack this kind of works in the physical world along with in the cyber world are the 4Ds, and there's a fifth D, but we'll stick with these 4Ds, and that's detection, deterrence, denial, and defense. And I'll hit some examples on all four of those. So just like there's a dynamic attack, AI allows you to leverage a dynamic type of defense. So when I worked for Wells Fargo, I worked for the threat disruptions department. And what our goal was to make it just difficult for attackers to do their jobs, to make it more, to make things take longer, for them to jump through more hoops. And thus they would just want to go somewhere else. Leveraging AI, you can make that even more dynamic. As an attacker discovers, hey, here's an easy way to get in, you can dynamically put up more defenses in that particular area to further disrupt that attack. And there is a principle in cybersecurity called the separation of duties. It is a way to force collusion in order for someone to do the wrong thing. So for instance, if someone's creating a piece of software, they shouldn't be the ones who test that software. That should be given to someone else. So in order for someone to put a piece of bad software out there, you need two people in order to make that happen. Someone to create that software and someone to test that software. There are instances where that principle is not widespread in different areas of authentication and authorization. Leveraging AI can detect those types of things where we have a situation where separation of duties is necessary, identify it, and even make corrections, building out controls on the fly. On the investigation side, for detection, you can create a knowledge graph so that if an attack was successful in one way, that whatever that pattern is that is discovered, and as other users are going down that pattern, again, dynamically, can identify what that is and send the user down a different path since there is a vulnerability there. So there are actions that are taken within an IT system every day that are completely normal. Creating a user, for instance, that happens every day, typically within a system. Drexel University, probably creating users on a daily basis, weekly basis, certainly on a semester basis. There are people within Drexel University that are copying the database to perform an analysis, copying items from the database to perform an analysis. And also there are, on a probably regular occurrence, the deletion of users. However, if someone were to create a user, copy the database, and delete a user, that could be a malicious activity, especially within a certain time block. Again, those types of things would be flagged as more something to look into further if that type of action were to occur. So rules could be written for that, and they already are, but as those patterns change, you can dynamically update your model and even rule set to defend against things going wrong. This idea as using ChatGPT or large language models as a team member, this is certainly happening whether we like it or not. As Jim mentioned, we were just at a conference in University of Louisville and at University of Kentucky, and one of the attendees there said one of their goals with the advancement of AI is to create a copy of themselves so that they can automate some of their work. And without a doubt, if you get really good at figuring out that ChatGPT is a mathematical model and how to manipulate that mathematical model by asking it very detailed, parameterized questions, you can get very good reports out of it. Based upon the information that you have, you can obfuscate that data that you're using and ultimately get really good reports where you can plug and play and help with compliance issues. That's all I have. Thank you very much for your time. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Jim, back to you. Paul?
Okay, thanks, Rich. And thank you also, Fred, very much. Let me, from there, kind of jump into, a little bit more about who we are and where this is not going to be a one-time event. As Paul indicated, he's a faculty member here at Drexel Law School, and he is the director of the program in cybersecurity, data privacy, and compliance. And he's asked me to be the chairman of the advisory board and create an advisory board. And Fred and Rich very kindly agreed to be members of that advisory board. And what we are going to try to do is bring this kind of programming, make it available more frequently as we go forward. Today, we've got about a dozen guests with us, and we appreciate the fact that you all signed up for this. We're recording it. We'll make that recording available, and also PDFs of the slides and all that good stuff that you can take away with you. Paul and I also have created a company called Portum Group International. And since you all got my invitation to join us today, if you look at my signature block, if you haven't already put me in the trash, you can find the link to Portum and take a look at that. What we're going to do through a kind of a symbiotic relationship between the law school and our little company is create an organization, we've got a website that's under construction now, and it's going to be called the International Artificial Intelligence Association, and it's going to be a non-payment, a non-paying association that anyone can join, and we're going to make not only resources like this webinar, but other sorts of resources available. I think we all share a fascination and a little bit of concern about artificial intelligence and what I think what we're labeling more precisely generative artificial intelligence, these algorithms that are able to morph and learn or give the appearance of learning, certainly, as based upon their interaction with the large language model off of which they feed and interaction with everyone who becomes a user of that model. And we certainly want to, we're learning as we go along. We had a little trouble with our technology today, so we're always learning more, and we'll continue to be doing that. And it's really going to be kind of an interactive and sharing kind of an organization. So more on that as we go forward into the future. One of the things I also attached to the email I sent you was a little speculative piece that I put together. It's actually going to be my blog for this week. And I'm talking about, kind of blue skying about where we are going with generative AI. And I would say that it is really, really pure speculation on my part, though backed up with some data and some evidence that I've been able to muster. And it seems to me a couple of things. I think, first of all, I think generative AI is going to be bigger than the internet. I think it may even be a bigger disruption than the Industrial Revolution. But I think we can learn from the Industrial Revolution. And I think what we learned from that is that there is going to be a hard patch here that we're going to have to go through. You know, when there was the transformation in the 18th and the early 19th century from an agrarian economy in England, for example, to a industrialized nation, we had a period of time. Anybody who's read any of the Dickens novels, you know, such as Oliver Twist, gets a very clear picture of what that period of transition was like. And I think we're going to see something like that as we move through this process of, I think we're really moving towards something known as the singularity, that point in time where generative AI is for all practical purposes as intelligent or more so than most human beings. And that is really going to eliminate or diminish the size of many professions and many occupations. I think one of the things that's unique about this particular revolution, as opposed to, say, the Industrial Revolution, is, you know, I think we've always kind of assumed that we who are lawyers and doctors and college professors and writers and artists and so forth are kind of above all of that automation stuff as a threat. You know, it's really the blue collar worker, the lower level white and pink collar workers who are going to be put into an uncomfortable position and maybe lose their jobs, maybe have to be retrained, maybe become redundant and what have you. And I don't think any profession or occupation is safe now. And I think we're going to probably get to a point somewhere out there in the not too distant future. And I say not too distant because I think, you know, we've always talked about, well, climate change is out there somewhere, and the singularity, that's out even further. And, you know, maybe our children are going to have to cope with it, or maybe it's our grandchildren, but not us. And now what we're finding, certainly what I'm finding, is, yes, we do have to cope with it. The future is now. And if we do end up at a point where I think we will end up, where we have a large population of essentially redundant citizens, I'll just limit it to the United States. What do we do with that? Do we let them create their own sort of black or gray market society, which is out of government's control? I don't think big corporations want to see that. I don't think big government wants to see that. And I think big government and big corporation, big business are going to have to respond to that. You know, we have a lot of corporations today that have made headlines year by year by paying very little federal income tax. I think it would be naive to think. I read a lot of stuff about people saying, well, you know, we have to use AI to make jobs more meaningful, not to eliminate jobs. Well, who are we kidding? Do we think that corporate America, and I'm not knocking corporate America, they're in the business of making a profit, but the reality is that if greater efficiency means the elimination of positions in order to improve bottom line for the shareholders, they're going to do that. But I think we're going to get to a place, a moment in time, when that's going to be an untenable position for both big government and big business to take. And we're going to have to decide what is the longer term solution. Will it be a uniform basic income that people who are redundant are going to get? Will it be something like Kurt Vonnegut's novel Player Piano, where individuals who don't have really meaningful jobs are going to have some sort of work that they're required to do in order to have some kind of a living wage? There are a variety of models that could be pursued. And I think one of the things that I think is going to have to happen and will happen is we're going to start to change our view about work and the meaning of work in our lives. I think that's already been going on for quite a long time. I don't think the younger generations have the same, many people in the younger generations have the same work ethic that some of us older individuals with a little gray in our hair have. And I think we're going to get to a point where people will not be defining themselves by what they do, but defining themselves in other ways and finding meaning in other ways. I'll make one more prediction, and then we'll kind of have open mic for the last few minutes here, if you will. And that is, I think that, you know, a lot of universities and colleges are wringing their hands these days because we're looking out 5 years from now to an enrollment cliff. as high school enrollment is predicted to be dropping, high school graduations, and we're all going to be struggling to bring in enough students to the campus each year. I think that, and in particular, the liberal arts have suffered in the last 25, 30, even 40 years. I think the liberal arts are going to enjoy a renaissance, because I think if we do it right and we say, okay, we have a population that's essentially redundant, and we have to, that population has to have meaning, has to be able to function as citizens of a democracy, and have meaningful lives, reasons to be, if you will. And I think we're going to see colleges opened up to open enrollment and have the opportunity for people to pursue the arts and the sciences and the various areas of learning, and fulfill themselves in those kinds of ways, without feeling that they are not worthwhile if they don't have a profession to talk about, to point to in their lives. I think that's going to be a profound change in society that is kind of looming out there, and is going to happen not because corporations or even government is going to feel benevolent, but because the only way for us to have a viable democratic society is to find ways in which people in that society feel that they have a stake in that society, and have some personal sense of self-worth. And with those comments, I'd like to just open it up. There are about 15 of us on the line today, 15 or 16, and hear comments from any of our other presenters or anybody else who's out there and have been listening to this up till now.
Jim, I dropped a question in the chat. I'm curious to know if anybody's using ChatGPT to do their work. How often are they doing it? How are they using it? Or any type of AI tools that we've discussed here. Feel free to answer that in this open forum or in the chat.
Rich, you want to go first and just say how you're using it?
I love using it for templates. I love using it just kind of as a fire starter. So giving it some clear parameters about what I'm looking to do, and then try to use that. Try to use that to inspire some more creativity, and then get some content out.
I find that really helpful too.
Go
ahead. I was going to ask Josh. Go ahead.
I was going to say two things. One is the latest Windows update. I think it may be a preview mode at this point, or an optional update, includes Windows Copilot, except that it also includes the enterprise version of its Bing chat, which ostensibly, and Lewis and I were talking about it this morning, ostensibly keeps information that you put in and the results from the chat both confidential. Well, not confidential, but private. It doesn't go to the third-party servers. So that could be interesting for as long as it's available. But that's going to be an internal discussion, because right now the question is, first of all, for lawyers, it's not even a question. The answer is that lawyers cannot reveal confidential information. And so if you ask questions that would lead a reasonably intelligent third party to understand what it is that you're working on and or for whom, that's not okay. So that's a long way of saying, when you can ask questions and that data remains within your walled garden, I think that will help folks a lot, but it also requires that the data is accurate.
Anyone else?
Hi, I have a question for Fred. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Hey, Fred. I'm interested in what you were saying about machine-generated images and things like that by AI. Do you think this might be applicable to, like, I'm concerned with the entertainment industry, where the actors are very concerned that now that their images are going to be computer generated and put into films. Do you think something like that, and of course you have that CGI now already, But is this stuff going to be copyrightable? Is that protected in view of what the copyright rulings that you found say?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, right now, if the Copyright Office maintains its current policy, which is anything AI generated is not protectable to the extent that AI was used to create it, then yeah, if you're doing a film, you're doing a TV show, and chunks of it are created using AI, if the Copyright Office policy stays the same, those bits and pieces will not be protected.
Yeah, you
Now,
say-
it's common, yeah. I mean, it's common in copyright. When you file the application, you disclaim anything that's third party. So, for example, if you're writing software and using an off-the-shelf library of software tools that you don't own, you disclaim ownership of that. That means that if you're creating a TV show and say a third of it is AI generated, then you disclaim ownership of that portion of it. Now, I think that should still be protected. I disagree with the Copyright Office, but I don't know that's going to stop Hollywood
Right.
because nothing, Hollywood seems to respond more towards are they making enough money based on their expectations rather than whether anything's going to be protected by copyright or not. But that's, I know it's more of a business focus than
it's just a main concern for the artists right now.
absolutely. And I think it should be across the board.
Fred, if I can jump in for just 1 second on
Please,
that.
Louis, this is closer to your field, please.
Yes. So I'll introduce myself very quickly, everybody. My name is Louis. I'm an associate at Wolf Tech, and I have some experience with the entertainment industry prior to coming here as well. So I've been following this fairly closely. And as a matter of fact, part of the strikes that have been ongoing and the strike that was recently resolved between the Writers Guild of America and the American Studios conglomerate group, that was based around the AI issue, as you stated it. On the writer's side, that strike, in part at least, was centered around the issue of writers being replaced by generative written works through text-based AI. And on the actor side, the Screen Actors Guild strike that is still ongoing as of last I saw, that concern is that the actors will be replaced visually, or at least that extras in the background of films or in television can be replaced by AI-generated duplicates of those same actors that have been used in prior works. So that is all part of the ongoing negotiations. And for the sake of specificity, I want to make it clear that's not the only issue that's been involved in either of these strikes. There are revenue-related and streaming-related issues as well. But on the AI front, to answer your question, Brian, that is something on the visual side with the actors and on the writing side with the writers that has absolutely been at the center of these strikes, and something that both unions are really rallying for.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm just, maybe my idea is that if it's not protectable, maybe the actors are going to be okay, but I don't know.
Right. I think the concern is exactly what Fred said from a business perspective, that the studios and the filmmakers will be using AI in whatever ways that they are allowed to push the boundaries. And the actors have to take the negotiations right now as their opportunity to stand up to that. So that's what's been happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments before we sign off?
I think, Jimmy, I just want to say, I think
Hi, Dave.
start, and hopefully we'll see more of these and have more discussions and follow the development of the law in this area.
I think David had a question. David Friedman had a question.
David?
Or comment.
Hi, Dave Friedman, attorney, used to work with Fred on a intellectual property publication, so I'd really love to hear his take on this. One of the big discussions about whether copyrights can be granted to a lot of these large language models is based on how the data these language models are taking in, where issues such as breach of a terms of service and breach of an artist's copyrights are used or necessarily included with creating the models. How do you see granting copyright protection when there's a bit of an unclean hands argument to be made about the creation of the model?
It's a great question, David. I agree with the concern. I don't see that the issues go away. I don't see the defenses go away. I think rather they come more to the forefront to become a bigger part of the issue. If somebody creates an AI generated work, that goes to Lewis's point. If it's a TV program, or Brian's point as well, if it's a TV program, if it's a movie, and the language model is trained on some third party movie or some third party work or some third party book, if it's a book, I think then you absolutely have more litigation going on. We've already seen, I think it was Sarah Silverman and a number of people with, I think, Authors Guild have filed. At last time I checked, I think it was 2 or 3 suits on exactly this issue. That large language models have been taught the works of artists and writers. Those artists and writers have not been paid, but the works or bits and pieces of them have come out the other side in the outputs from those large language models, from those AIs. And I think that's absolutely a question of the copyright law as to whether or not that's an infringement. Especially then you then have to question from a practical standpoint, how do you show substantial similarity when it's only bits and pieces? In many ways, it begins to look like some of the questions we also have seen with the early days of hip hop, where they were using bits and pieces of earlier music. And the question is, well, okay, if it's 5 notes or 10 notes, and we know that it's this recording from 1963 by this artist. It's a flute solo from I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, who was the son of the author of Shrek, and it ends up in a Beastie Boys song. That was done actually with permission, but it's only a couple notes that show up and are repeated. At what point do you have enough evidence, and do you hold that that's a copyright infringement? I think we've dealt with these issues. I don't see that. I think that they're good issues to address. I don't think they go away. I think they get bigger. I think they make more work for lawyers.
Fred or Lewis, do you see an ASCAP BMI solution?
To an extent, I think the PROs can definitely be a step in the right direction towards advocating for musicians here. I think where I see musicians being really affected by this, however, is less on the copyright side, more on the rights of publicity side, where voices can be replicated using AI much easier than ever before. There's plenty of case law around sound-alikes, but it's different now where you can make a 1-for-1 to that voice rather than having to seek out a sound-alike, or in Tom Hanks's case, just call your brother. So when it comes to music, and that's a true story. Tom Hanks actually uses his brother as his sound-alike. Jim Hanks plays Woody in all of the non-movies of Toy Story, but that's an aside. I think rights of publicity law needs to be radically reformed. Right now, it's a patchwork across the states. Some states recognize it, others do not, to varying extents all throughout the nation. And I think BMI and ASCAP should be involved in this. Sound Exchange should be involved in this. Every artist management group should be involved in this, especially the agencies, but it is a growing area.
There's a case years ago, even before he had any of this, Bette Midler sued, I think it was Ford. They wanted the advertising agency for Ford or one of the other car companies wanted Midler to sing as background to the car commercial. She refused, so they went and found a sound-alike who actually happened to be somebody who was a backup singer for Midler on and off over the years. And they said, well, yeah, she sounded a little bit like Midler, but it wasn't Bette Midler. We used somebody else singing in her own voice. Midler won the case because they told the singer to sing just like Bette Midler, and it sounded just like Bette Midler. So,
yeah.
Bette won.
Really, really interesting. Okay, well, we want to let you get back to whatever you were planning to do this afternoon. So I want to thank.
Jim, we got one more. We have one more question. We have
Oh,
a
I'm
moment
sorry.
for-
Let's
Oh yeah,
do
Michael
it.
has
Absolutely. We have a little bit of time left.
Michael, you had your hand raised, or did we lose
Yeah,
Michael?
thank you,
Go ahead.
Mike Rosati, a friend of Dr. Castagnera, and thank
Hi,
you
Mike.
for having me and taking the time on today. Just a quick question. Earlier this year, several AI experts signed an open letter calling for kind of slowing the pace of growth, and I think the Biden administration had several of those individuals in earlier this year. How effective is that going to be, or is this just a weak attempt at delaying any real progress in AI?
I'm not sure it has had any effect at all. I mean, I think it's part of the. I'm glad that there's been discussion. It's certainly part of the public discussion and part of the public debate. Some of the people calling for a hold were people who were heavily invested in AI companies themselves or own their own AI companies. And having said that there should be a halt to AI development, they then continue to fund their own company AI development. So I think it's interesting. I don't think it's had a meaningful effect, but it is interesting all the way around, both from the public relations standpoint and public perception standpoint, related issues, including how people perceive it.
Yeah,
I agree with Fred.
Go ahead.
I agree with Fred. I believe it's a lot of posturing, and efforts would be better spent with building the controls around making it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing as things advance.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in here and add that, we've been talking about having a national data privacy regime since forever. People are blue in the face talking about it, and Congress has been on hold on that because, one side of the aisle wants to have a data privacy regime that looks like the one in California, if not the one in Europe. And the other side of the aisle wants to have a preemptive statute that would overrule California's very restrictive data privacy regime. And therefore, nothing has emerged from Congress. And so I think to anticipate something, I think when you're talking about this, Rich, I think we're talking about statutory and regulatory action as the only way that would happen. And I don't see that happening at the national level. Now, we do see more appetite among more and more states to pass data privacy laws of some degree of stringency and robustness that varies from California on one extreme. I'm not sure who I'd put on the other, but that there is a growing interest at the state level. With AI, yeah, I think that Fred is absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Rich, that we're not going to see voluntary changes, self-regulation that's going to have any significant meaning. And even the people like Elon Musk who say, oh, it's ChatGPT version 4 is scary smart. And then, of course, from out of the other side of his mouth, he's saying, let's invest in this technology. And I just don't, there's either going to be some governmental action, and I don't see that in the present climate in Washington, D.C., or there is going to be some, whether it comes from litigation or it comes from consumer activity, or maybe, for example, with the writers in Hollywood, where there is some organized labor action, some form of pushback to force corporations to voluntarily, not so much voluntarily, but kind of reluctantly adopt some standards, as has happened in some other industries, not because they are eleemosynary institutions, not because they want to do something beneficial out of the goodness of their heart, but that they realize that it's good business to be self-regulating. And that in fact has happened in some industries, and I suppose it could possibly happen here. I'm not enormously optimistic that we're going to slow this train down.
All right. I think we have a question from Mario. I see, Mario, do you have your hand up?
You there, Mario? Maybe we've lost him, and I see we're down to 1 minute. I'm really a bear about letting people go when we promise to let them go. So again, just to reiterate, Paul and I and our board members, who I thank for their presentations today, which were great. We'll be doing more in the future. We'll be doing some of it through Drexel Law School, some of it through Portum Group International, our little company. And so please stay tuned. I think, as we do more programming, we'll see the audience grow, and we'll see a lot more, we'll see the excitement grow. And what our goal is to mutually learn together, grow together, and in that way, each of us in our own way, depending on our particular interests, Rich as a consultant, and Fred and Josh and Lewis as practicing attorneys, and everybody else out there in the ways in which you have an interest in AI, that we can all benefit from our cooperative exchanges of information and opinions. And so please stay tuned, and I'm hoping that we'll see you all again the next time that we do one of these programs, which I think will not be in the too distant future, probably sometime after the new year. Thanks everybody very, very much. We'll make the recording and
well done. Thank you.
available. Okay, Josh, thank you. Thank you, Brian, for being here. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.